One of my favorite movies of all time is Stand By Me. Never before have I been so emotionally impacted by a movie than I was the first time I saw this film. It's so brutally honest and genuine about everything it's saying that if you let it, it can put you through existential paranoia about aging. Like, wow, this is some powerful storytelling. I didn't grow up with this movie, so my love for it is not affected by childhood memories of watching it. My dad tried to show it to me when I was young, but turned it off halfway through because it had too much swearing. I didn't see the film in its entirety until I was well into my teens, but when I did see it, I fell in love with it. I'm going to try to analyze the film and explain why it means so much to me and why it's one of my all-time favorites. Also, spoiler warning. If you haven't seen this movie and are planning to see it, then hold off on watching this video until you do that. First, some history and general information about the film. The movie was based on a novella by Stephen King called The Body, which was featured in an anthology novel by King called Different Seasons, which also spawned The Shawshank Redemption. So that's two of the greatest films of all time adapted from the same book. Good job, Stephen King. The movie was directed by Rob Reiner, and although it's very tempting to play a South Park clip right now, I'm going to have to pass. The movie is about a group of friends trying to find the dead body of a missing child. This premise is so sadistic, but at the same time it's so natural. At its core, it's a movie about a group of kids going on an adventure. We all have childhood memories of wandering around with friends, joking, and having a great time. This movie takes you right back to that. Stand By Me is not a kids movie, but rather an adult movie about kids. The film is very reflective with its themes of friendship and personal growth. It almost can't be fully appreciated until you're older and years past your own childhood. It's safe to say that the movie's biggest strength is its characters and the actors that play those characters. The treehouse scene at the very beginning of the film introduces everyone perfectly. Right away you get a sense that these are real kids. You don't get some watered down, overly optimistic portrayal of childhood. We are introduced to these characters smoking, swearing, and telling dirty jokes. All things that real 12-year-olds do.
How do you know a Frenchman's been in your backyard?
French, okay?
Your garbage cans are empty and your dog's pregnant.
I don't think kids smoke as much these days, but the movie is set in the 50s, so it feels appropriate. Point is, right away, they feel like real kids. And as the film goes on and we get to know them as people, you start to realize as a viewer that you remember kids like this from your own past. Chris is wise beyond his years. It's explained in the film that he comes from a family of criminals, and you definitely get the feeling that he's been through some rough shit, and as a result has had to unfairly age faster than he should have. He acts as the fatherly leader of the group, and although he's far more mature and mentally developed than the others, he still has that 12-year-old sense of humor that makes him seem like a kid. Vern is the exact opposite of Chris. He's emotionally and socially underdeveloped for his age, and is very childish. In a lot of ways he seems like a tag-along, but the dynamic of the group would not work without him. Everyone knew someone like this growing up. You know, that kid who's really weird and has no social skills that you still let hang around your group of friends because you can tell they're genuinely a nice person, although they can be really annoying sometimes. That's Vern. He also has some of the best comedic moments in the movie.
I brought a comb.
What do we need a comb for?
Well, if we get on TV, we want to look good, don't we?
A lot of thinking, Vern.
Thanks.
Teddy is your typical crazy kid. He's a victim of severe child abuse and has a burnt ear from his father. He can be obnoxious, rude, angry, and irrational, but again, he's also very realistic. For all his faults, he's one of the most sympathetic characters in the movie. His life story is one big tragedy, and his later life, as explained in the end monologue of the film, is exactly where you'd see him end up. It's clear that he's not really a bad kid, he's just an extremely damaged and hurt one. And finally, we get to Gordy, who's more or less our main character. Although the film is narrated by a grown-up version of him, and it's essentially his story, he's in a lot of ways the hardest character to explain. I think this is because he doesn't have a singular defining trait. Gordy is my favorite character because he's the one I feel I was most like as a kid. He's very introverted, sensitive, and emotional. He's also very cautious and careful about his decisions. You get a sense just by watching him that there's more going on in his head than he's letting off. We get to see his home life and you instantly feel bad for him. His brother has passed away and his parents neglect him. He wants affection and love. He used to get this from his older brother, but with him gone, he can only feel wanted from his friends. When casting for this movie, Rob Reiner tried to find kids that were most like these characters in real life, so it would be easier for them to act convincingly, and he nailed it. This is a perfectly casted movie. Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, and Jerry O'Connell were all amazing. They weren't just good for child actor performances, they were simply great performances. Like, these kids flawlessly pulled off some heavy dramatic moments. Their ability to nail these key story beats is what made the film work. My favorite example of this, and really one of my favorite moments in film history, is the conversation between Chris and Gordy around the campfire. Gordy wakes up after a traumatic dream, recalling the events of his brother's funeral. Chris then opens up about his family's reputation and the fear of never escaping the shadow of his last name. River Phoenix is fantastic in this scene.
I never thought a teacher. Oh, piece of fuck anyway. I just wish that I could go someplace where nobody knows me.
In a similar moment near the end of the film, Gordy has a breakdown about his father neglecting him and cries out, "My daddy hates me," which is one of the most emotional scenes in the movie. These two scenes establish a special relationship between Gordy and Chris, which is the heart of the film. Chris tries to be some sort of father figure to Gordy and influence his decisions. He knows that Gordy has amazing potential that could be wasted without proper guidance. Although the movie is extremely dramatic, as shown by these heavier scenes, it's also extremely funny. It has that classic 12-year-old boy humor. They harshly insult each other, and it's hilarious.
You four-eyed pile of shit.
I love the simple moments and seemingly pointless discussion. There's a great scene around the campfire that's a montage of pointless discussion.
Mickey's a mouse, Donald's a duck, Pluto's a dog. What's Goofy? If I can only have one food for the rest of my life, that's easy. Pez. Cherry-flavored Pez. No question about it.
When I first saw the film, the one scene that always stood out as feeling out of place for me is the lard-ass scene. But nowadays, I find it fucking hilarious. Just thinking of a crowd of people chanting "Lard-ass! Makes me laugh. And it does seem like a story a 12-year-old would find endlessly entertaining, so it totally fits in the context of the scene and makes for one of the strongest moments of comedy. There's so many great iconic moments in this film, the train scene possibly being the most recognizable in pop culture. As soon as it's set up, you know exactly where it's going. From the moment Will Wheaton yells, "Train!" to the moment they barely escape death, it's pure intensity and excitement. It's just one of those classic film scenes that will be remembered forever as an iconic moment in cinema. The leeches scene, the dog chase scene, and that classic line,
You guys want to go see a dead body?
have all reached a legendary status in film. The movie is also very well shot and perfectly paced. It has great cinematography and amazing visual iconography that sticks in your mind. The image of those four boys walking the train tracks, singing traveling songs is magical. Yeah, I know I'm a huge loser, you don't have to remind me. The last thing I want to talk about is the ending. The ending of Stand By Me kicks you in the fucking balls. What I love about it is it's not some overly dramatic ending where one of them is shot or something like that. The ending is so powerful and hits you so hard because it's brutally honest about life. It's explained that the group didn't stay friends forever. They drifted apart and eventually just became faces in the hallway to each other.
As time went on, we saw less and less of Teddy and Vern, until eventually they became just two more faces in the halls. It happens sometimes. Friends come in and out of your life like busboys in a restaurant.
This is so devastating because almost everyone can relate to this. I know I can. Everyone had a friend or a group of friends that you were really close to when you were a kid that you didn't stay friends with forever. A lot of times you lose these friends in high school or later in life when you just grow apart from each other. The ending is so emotional because everyone has experienced it. We also get to hear what happened to the boys later in life. The biggest punch to the gut is the story of Chris's death. By far, the most powerful scene in this film is Chris walking off into the distance after his final talk with Gordy. He fades away, which is a symbolic representation of his passing. The excerpt from the adult Gordy's book we see on the computer to end the film is the scene that really brings you to tears. There's no music and no speaking, and the quote written on screen embodies the film perfectly. I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone?